What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Somewhat Sports Podcast. My name is Chris, and I'm joined by two of the greats in this industry, Jurg and Dame. Fellas, how are we this week?
Annoyed because it took half an hour to set up this podcast, but I'm excited because I leave to Miami tomorrow, and I get to get far away from Chris, so that's always a plus.
The magic words to get the equipment working was just Dave mentioning his vacation, actually, ladies and gentlemen. So there's a peek behind the scenes. I'm good. I'm back. I'm happy to be back. As Chris said, I was apparently partying in Kansas City last week. Had a good time. Had some Kansas City barbecue. I can promise you there was no random waitress or barbecue shop owner kissed for no reason, unlike what certain TikTokers do. I can promise you that didn't happen on the trip in any way, shape, or form. But aside from that, Kansas City was fun. But I'm more happy to be back with my boys. It's on the best sports podcast there is possible, the Somewhat Sports Podcast.
Yeah, so Jurg, I'm happy you had a good time in Kansas City. For the listeners listening, yeah, Dame's audio's fucked because I don't know what's on. I don't know what's going on with his laptop settings, nor do I care because now I'm getting pissed off at it because this is a recurring issue, and we have to jump through loopholes to get to this point. So, Dame, you better sound clear as hell for our listeners and our viewers.
Enough.
Okay, here we go. Guys, NFL free agency has begun, and there has been a plethora of moves, just signings everywhere, re signings everywhere, trades, all that stuff, and we're going to talk about it. This is going to be a NFL dominated episode. We're going to talk about all the major moves. A bunch of moves happened. We're only going to talk about the key signings. We have a list of teams that we're going to actually talk about, and then I'm going to go through just single moves throughout the NFL that I think were important, okay? So we're going to talk about the Broncos. We're going to talk about the Falcons. We're going to talk about the Bears, the Panthers, and also the trade between the Bears and the Panthers because that was a blockbuster move that kind of shifted the entire league. So we'll talk about those teams and the moves they made. And then we're going to talk about just solo signings. I feel like major solo signings that occurred throughout the league after that. So, fellas, are we ready?
Yes, sir.
Yo, other one, guy?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so say it, bro. Okay, let's start off with the trade that shook things up, that kind of was the catalyst for all the moves that occurred afterwards. The Bears and Panthers, blockbuster trade. The Chicago Bears trade the first overall pick to the Carolina Panthers. The Bears get the ninth overall pick. DJ Moore, the 2023 second round pick, but that's from the 49ers, a 2024 first round pick, which would be from the Panthers, and a 2025 second round pick. And the Panthers get the first overall pick. So there's that. Guys, oof, let's talk about this because this made waves. This made waves. So I think once the Bears got the first overall pick, I feel like a lot of people predicted they trade out of it just because there's just so many gaps in the roster and just they have to make so many moves. And then I think Schefter or Ian Rappaport announced a few weeks ago that they were going to shop the first overall pick. And everyone was thinking teams that could possibly move up. And to be honest, they were probably a dark horse for me, but I did not think the Panthers would pull the trigger. But they did. And they get the first overall pick. They'll get to select the quarterback of their choosing. And for the Bears, man, did they get a haul. I thought they got a massive haul. They get very generous draft compensation. You get a first round pick next year as well. Like, that's kind of nuts. And for me, I think the key thing here is that they got DJ Moore. I did not think the Panthers would trade DJ Moore. I mean, props to the Bears because now you give Justin Fields his number one wide receiver. He gets his wide receiver one, obviously a weapon that he needs. This adds to the weapons they already have in Darnell Mooney and also, I believe, Chase Claypool. This, for the Bears, no-brainer. So you get extra draft compensation, but you also get Justin Fields, wide receiver one. And the Bears, this is how, I mean, look, that NFC North, I believe, right? The NFC North, wide open now that I believe Aaron Rodgers is leaving. Nothing confirmed yet, but shout out to the Bears. They get Justin Fields a weapon. They get a bunch of draft picks. And they already made moves in free agency. They kind of improved the roster. Now, the Panthers, I remember when I saw this trade and I was like, okay, I think they give up a little too much. I still don't understand the DJ Moore. Some I don't understand including DJ Moore in this trade. I think the draft capital was enough, but maybe the trade doesn't happen if DJ Moore doesn't get involved in that trade package. So who knows? They did make moves in free agency as well, and we're going to talk about both teams' moves in free agency so far. But Jerk, let me start off with you. What'd you make of this trade? What'd you make of the trade package? Obviously, the Bears um improve a lot from this trade package. Uh, so what'd you make of this trade? What'd you make of the trade details? And what do you make of both teams' directions going forward after the trade?
So
Forget free agency. Just
yeah.
talk about this trade in
Yeah.
general.
So I think, for me personally, I think this was a win-win, and I will explain why as we go through this. I think this is a win-win because you look at both teams and what were the needs for both teams. What was the number one need for both these teams ultimately? The Chicago Bears made it clear very, after they were awarded the first overall pick because the Houston Texans and Lovie Smith just ruined everything, at least for the upper brass of that organization, that the Bears were dead set on Justin Fields being the franchise guy. He's the quarterback. He's the guy they want to build around, et cetera, et cetera. While some people on this podcast might disagree with it, at the end of the day, that's the decision they made. So when you're doing that, look at what the Bears roster was last season. Not good. When you're the Chicago Bears, yes, the first overall pick is nice, but what you need is depth. What you need is to bring in as many new guys, new pieces, new blood as much as possible, and that could be via free agency or that could be through the draft. And the draft, to bring in a lot of guys, high talent players, potentially, especially in the first 3 rounds, is a big deal. So I think from the Bears' perspective, the first overall pick, like you kind of said, Chris, it was a luxury that they got it. I think they were always going to trade it no matter what. If you're the Carolina Panthers, you look at a team last season that it was obvious they needed a quarterback. I mean, you talk about the NFC North being wide open, Chris. The NFC South is even more wide open. The NFC South is literally anyone's for the taking this season. There is no, bona fide favorite in that division this year. And so if you're the Carolina Panthers, you look at a team that has a couple good young pieces on the defensive side of things, from the defensive backfield of J.C. Horn and Jeremy Chin, from a linebacking core led by Shaq Thompson, from Brian Burns being the star edge rusher on this team, and Derek Brown up the middle as a good run-stuffing defender. An offensive line that was better last season than what the Bears was, and Ike Ekwono getting his first season in the league with Taylor Moton as the opposite side tackle. This was a team that needed a quarterback. And ever since Dave Tepper took over, what has been the revolving door on this team? It's been the quarterback spot. They weren't able to figure it out under Matt Rule in any way, shape, or form. They got decent play last season, but it was obvious Sam Darnold was never going to be the guy. PJ Walker, sadly, will never be the guy. And Matt Corral didn't even play last season. So it ultimately led up to the Panthers need that franchise quarterback that they haven't had since Cam Newton's MVP season. So when you consider that, it made sense from a need and a logical perspective. Why did this trade happen? The Chicago Bears have the franchise quarterback, but they need to build up around a lot. The Panthers believe they have a couple pieces in place. They do still need to add more, but they need the franchise quarterback. They need that guy to lead the way, especially because they got a new head coach in this offseason that we've already talked about in previous podcast episodes in Frank Reich. So there's the analysis on, did the trade make sense? The trade definitely made sense from both sides of it. With the Chicago Bears getting extra pieces plus DJ Moore, and the Panthers now are going to get their franchise quarterback. Now about the trade package itself, and I've been disappointed as to people saying that this is a fleece because, oh, how little anyone ever looks back at history. The only part of this trade that I don't like for what the Carolina Panthers gave up was DJ Moore. And I think that's the only reason that you could say the Panthers may have lost out on this. But let me put DJ Moore to the side for a second. The draft pick compensation. Your first this year, your second this year, your first next year, and a 2025 second round pick. That's a good haul for the Bears. And that's about the standard for a first overall pick. And that's why I don't understand why people are calling this a fleecing. Because if you look back in draft history, 2012 NFL draft, when the Washington, then, we can't say the name anymore, so let's just say Washington Commanders traded up to number 2 with the St. Louis Rams, they gave up 3 first-round picks in that deal and a 2012 second-round pick. In the 2016 NFL draft, we saw trades for the number 1 and the number 2 overall picks alone, where the Rams traded up to the number 1 pick that the Tennessee Titans had, And they traded a first, a second, and a third in that draft, plus a first and a third round pick in 2017. The Philadelphia Eagles traded up with the Cleveland Browns in that draft, and they traded a first, a third, a fourth in that draft, a first in 2017, and a second in 2018. When the Kansas City Chiefs traded up to the 10th overall pick, I think it was, to get Mahomes, they had 2 first round picks in that draft. They traded both those first round picks. When the Houston Texans traded up for Deshaun Watson, I'm pretty sure an extra first round pick was involved there. Every single time you have to trade up in the draft, especially to a top pick, especially when you kind of know it's obvious the team needs a quarterback, there has to be extra draft compensation given up. I don't understand from that perspective, why are we calling this a fleece? This is not a fleece. This is standard quo for getting the first overall pick. I don't care if the Panthers had the 9th pick. Having the 9th pick means they didn't need to give up a third first round pick in this deal. Like, the Bears got for that first overall pick very good value. I'm not arguing that perspective. But for the analysis that I've seen from anyone that is calling this a fleece, I don't understand it. I just gave you 3 trades where the draft pick compensation was equal to, relatively speaking, value-wise, to what the Panthers just did. So this is not a fleece of a deal. This was a completely fair trade package. But like I said, this is where I bring back DJ Moore. Me personally, I like DJ Moore. I think he's a really talented wide receiver. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, wide receivers are becoming a plenty in the NFL. Maybe not in this particular draft, but wide receivers are becoming something that you could acquire a bit more easily to become a wide receiver one. You could trade for guys now. If last offseason was any indication, you can get guys if the situation persists. There's a certain team that we're going to talk about here in a little bit that is allegedly rumored to be trading one of their top 2 wideouts. Could potentially happen in this period of time. Who's to say the Panthers don't do that? T. Higgins is set to be a free agent next year. Are the Bengals going to be able to afford him because they got to extend both Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow in a year time? They have to hand out those contracts. They still need to add more to the offensive line. Like, the Panthers, yes, it sucks that they traded DJ Moore, but they can replace DJ Moore, I think, a bit easier in today's game than I think we realize. So with that, I don't think this is a fleece in any way. I think this is, for a number 1 pick trade on paper, and we need to see how this plays out, this is a bona fide win-win. The Bears are going to get the assets needed to build around their franchise quarterback, and the Panthers now are hopeful to get their franchise quarterback, but still have a lot to build around because they still have a second round pick this year. They still have their depth picks this year. They still have picks next year in the 2024 draft. Yes, they had to trade their first round pick, but they still got their second. They still got their third. In 2025, that second round pick, like, they could get that back. Like, they could get a second round pick back in 2 years' time. I don't see how people are saying this is a loss for the Panthers. This is a pretty standard win-win, in my opinion.
Well, I'm actually going to say it's a big loss for the Panthers. It didn't make sense to me what they were doing here. I get that's the package you got to give up to move up to 1. I completely understand that. But I just don't believe in bringing in a quarterback at a high draft pick when you don't have a team set up around him. You're just setting him for failure. And whether it's C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, or Anthony Richardson, neither one of them are set up for success going on this team. I understand they have an excellent coaching staff from top to bottom, but they have a bottom 10 offensive line in the league. I can't name you any other wide receiver on their team outside of Terrence Marshall, and he's literally like a wide receiver 4 on any good team. They just signed Miles Sanders, so I guess you have a running back there, but he's not even all that great. I think he benefited a lot from the Eagles, where he had literally the best offensive line in the league. And then he also had Jalen Hurts running that kind of RPO with him, which took a lot of pressure off of Sanders and gave him a lot of running lanes. But when you put Miles Sanders with a bottom 10 offensive line, who knows who their quarterback's going to be, whether he's even going to start game 1 or not. And obviously with no weapons, you just stack the box. This team is just set up for failure. I'm hoping it's not – I think of all the quarterbacks, Bryce Young is probably the worst option here for the Panthers because of how small he is. He's just going to get beat up all day. CJ Stroud would probably be the best option, but regardless, like I said, I mean, CJ Stroud is playing a first-round wide receivers in Ohio State and moving to whatever the Panthers call this NFL offense. Poor him, and they're just, to me, it's just going to be a waste of a pick, and you're going to look back and be like, wow, the Bears completely stole this trade. For the Bears side of it, I mean, the Panthers pick next year is literally going to be a top 3 pick. Like, that's how bad the Panthers are going to be, and that's when you're going to be able to draft your franchise quarterback because clearly Justin Fields is not it. But with this trade, you do give him that one more year to kind of prove himself and prove me personally wrong, but to prove to everybody else that he can actually play the quarterback position. You get a couple draft picks this year. You still have the 9th overall pick in the draft, which you can use on offensive lineman, wide receiver, or even defense. Um, and the biggest thing, like you guys mentioned, I think is DJ Moore going this trade. I'm not saying he's a top 5, top 10 receiver, but he's a true number 1 receiver on any team. Um, Before this year, he had like 3 straight years of like 1,100 yards. It's just his quarterbacks could never get him in the end zone, so his touchdown numbers are always low. But if you really truly want to see what Justin Fields has and you want to blame the team you had around him for him not being able to throw 5-yard passes, bring it in a guy like DJ Moore, I think is perfect because, like I said, he's a true number 1 receiver. And if Justin Fields can't get him the ball, then you'd know it's truly a Justin Fields problem instead of DJ Moore because DJ Moore is far more established. But yeah, you get a 2nd-round pick this year. Even though you traded your 2nd-round pick for Chase Claypool, which to me is really like not talked about enough, how bad of a trade that was. You could have had the 1st pick in the 2nd round and then still had the Panthers pick. You would have had you would have had 4 picks in the top 35 or something like that. Regardless, you get your 2nd round pick back with this trade, so that gives you another option there to improve this team and put a team around Justin Fields. But just based off the fact that you knew you weren't drafting a quarterback, clearly, getting out of that 1st pick and getting this much in return. And on top of that, an established number 1 wide receiver. That's something you don't see often in trade ups. Like the 49ers and Dolphins a couple years ago, you didn't see any players in the trade. Pretty sure when the Rams traded up with whoever it was and they got Jared Goff, and the Eagles traded up to get Carson Wentz, I don't think there was any players involved in those trades either, especially not established players. You don't see that often, so this is kind of a rare instance. But, I mean, for the Bears, you'd much rather have DJ Moore. I'd say DJ Moore is probably worth like a 2nd-round pick, like if it was just a 1-for-1 trade. So if you're the Bears, you'd much rather have DJ Moore than an additional 2nd-round pick, clearly. But for the Panthers, it just doesn't make sense, especially if you're clearly trading up to 1 to draft a quarterback. So why not? If I'm the Panthers, though, I'd rather give up obviously a 2nd-round pick than DJ Moore, so you can have that established number 1 receiver for your quarterback to throw to. Because now he's literally thrown to absolutely nobody. And you gave up all these picks to move up too. So it's not like you have all these options to go draft a wide receiver. You have so many holes in your team that you need as many picks as possible. It's not like you're a quarterback away. You're a wide receiver, offensive line, defensive end, cornerback, safety, linebacker, literally everything outside of like a coaching staff. So I would say it's a big win for the Bears. I'm confused on why the Panthers would go all in now when they don't have an established team, but it's good to talk about, I guess.
They hold on.
They have a
They do
decent
not
offensive
have that.
line.
No, hold on. They don't have that many needs. Like I know Chris said, keep free agency out of this, but since we've already brought it up, they signed Von Bell, so that defensive back crew is set. They need a little bit more on the defensive line. I'd agree with, and the linebacking core is fine. So yes, you could say, but they're a better position than a lot of these teams have been in the last couple of years for the first overall. This was the Texans' first overall pick. Oh, that QB is screwed. Like there is nothing on that team, especially because there were apparently rumors that they wanted
Who's
to
he
trade
throwing
Larry
to?
Tunsil. Like, okay, but then literally just said wide receivers are becoming more like plentiful. They could trade for a guy or sign one. T. Higgins is a free agent next year. Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy could be traded for from the Broncos. You could trade for these guys. Like we need to stop pretending like we can't get guys in anymore. It's hard to get number 1s. Clearly, the last 2-3 years have shown you can find number 1s. You just need to do so.
You just need to
And
be a good team,
that's
though.
number 1. Number
That's the
2,
thing.
well, you're talking about a good team. Like, yes, the Bears got a lot of draft picks here. They need to now execute and make all the
Absolutely.
right draft picks.
But
Like this could be. I'm saying this is a win-win. You're saying it's one-sided. It could be lose-lose at the end of the day. The Panthers could screw up the pick, and maybe their quarterback didn't have the situation, and the Bears could mess up every single draft pick they've gotten. So, like to say that this, like I said, I don't think this was a fleece. I think comparative to all the trades that I mentioned before, I think the Panthers gave up equal value. If anything, they gave up DJ Moore so they didn't have to give up even more draft picks. Because I know you mentioned that all those trades that I previously mentioned didn't have any players. They also had more draft picks in quantity than this one. If DJ Moore saved them from having to give up next year's second round pick in 2024, or maybe even the first round pick in 2025, I get that. They wanted to try to keep the cupboards as much as they could. Like, yes, DJ Moore is good, but there's plenty of other guys in this league that could take that role, especially a T. Higgins or a Cortland Sutton. Like, he's not above those guys in any way.
T. Higgins isn't going to Panthers. He's not leaving a Bengals team that's ready to win a Super Bowl every year to go to a Panthers team that has so many holes. Like I said, but
Once money comes in, Dame, like that, like you say, he's not leaving. But if they
there's
can't
going to
pay
be
him,
other
then the
teams that
Panthers
are going to
can.
give him money that are contending teams. The Panthers aren't the only team with money. But the difference between the Bears in the situation, both teams are god awful. There's a reason they're picking the top 10 of the draft for multiple years now. Both teams have a massive amount of holes. The difference in this trade is the Bears got multiple amounts of picks and DJ Moore to be able to try to fill those holes and try. Obviously, it's guaranteed you're not hitting on every single draft pick. This literally never happens. It's almost impossible. But the Bears gave themselves more of a chance to get a couple players in this draft than the Panthers did. The Panthers gave them multiple picks over the next 2 to 3 years when they have so many different holes in this team. Their defense is not good. They have Brian Burns. Von Bell is not that. He's an average player. He's a C-plus player. He's a guy that's probably might get cut after next year because they want to go sign someone else or clear cap space because he's not a core guard.
He doesn't need to be the guy. He doesn't need to be the safety there. It's Jeremy Chin as the other safety. It's J.C. Horn as the number one corner. Von Bell just needs to play support, which he did on the Bengals this season with 4 interceptions and 8 pass deflections. That's not bad.
He also was playing next to Bates. So playing next to a guy like that really helps you out a lot. But they have no guys in the middle of the field, linebackers. They have one pass rusher. Everybody knows you need multiple pass rushers. And the most important thing for a quarterback is their offense. And that's what I think we're not talking about enough here. They literally might have the worst offense in the league. They drafted the offensive lineman last year, and they have Morton on the other tackle side. But the middle of their offensive line is god awful. And like I said, Miles Sanders is not the answer at running back. And you have nobody to throw to. Terrence Marshall is a wide receiver 4 on a good team.
They signed Hayden Hurst.
Yeah, you're helping my point there. That's like the Jets signed Tyler Conklin or CJ Uzomah, whatever his name is. Like it's
CJ
not
Uzomah.
Yeah, it's not a difference maker there.
I mean, he's more of a pass catcher than either of those guys that the Jets got last year.
I guess
it's proven he's done it for multiple teams. Like you're talking about getting established guys, they technically just added 2 established guys to the skill position group. Look, I mean, if you want to say there's still,
if we're gonna call Hayden Hurst an established guy, then it kind of just win the argument by default.
He's been in the league for 7 years. What are you talking about?
I think you're underselling it, Dame.
Okay.
I'm not saying he's going to be an all-pro, but I'm saying like the Bears had way more holes to fill than the Panthers, and they needed the more quantity of picks.
Hayden Hurst's career high in receiving yards in a season is 571.
Okay, and now he's going to go to a team that it's weird to say he might be the number 1 tight end, but that might be the case here.
And he played with Joe
Burrow. Go to a different team. Yeah, the Bengals don't. Okay, well, first of all, he was the backup tight end. We know that in Baltimore, and then with the Bengals, that offense isn't predicated on the tight end usage. It's Zach Taylor. He's come from Sean McVay. Sean McVay's tight ends don't get the highest usage rate. This is going into a different offense. That's a bit of a difference. If you want to say, I agree with you. The guard spots that the Bengals need help. They kept Bozeman, so they kept their center that they've had the last couple of years. They still have that consistency. I agree that there are still needs on this Panthers team. But at the end of the day, they need the franchise quarterback. And again, Chris brought it up. The NFC South is wide open. This Panthers team, it may not be. Not perfect.
I think the Saints are far ahead of the Panthers. They're better. They might quite possibly be better at every single position.
I don't know about better at every single position.
Besides coaching staff.
Yeah, but as we saw last season, that matters. Sean Payton was making Jameis Winston look like a pretty good quarterback. Under Dennis Allen, Jameis Winston looked like nothing. They have the. Is it the worst coach? No, they have the second worst coach maybe in the division. Maybe. Dennis Allen's not a good coach. And Derek Carr, I gave my opinions last week. He's not that great of a quarterback that people are thinking. So I don't think the Saints are the Saints are not as big of a favorite as you think they are. That division's wide open.
Compared to the Panthers, they're better at every single position. You can't give me a position that they're not better than them.
I'm not saying every single position. I'm just not.
Okay, all right. That was a good segment. Well, since we kind of already talked about the Panthers free agency moves so far in that segment. Let's talk about some of the Bears free agency moves because they also made some very major additions as well. We're gonna talk about only like the key additions and possibly the key re-signings as well. Not every move, but the Bears. So they signed T.J. Edwards, beef up that defense. 3 years, 19.5 million, and they also signed Tremaine Edmonds, 4 years, 72 million, and then they also add some help to that offensive line and signing Nate Davis, 3 years, 30 million. Derg, like these are some pretty big moves, and it's clear, they made that move with the Panthers. You get DJ Moore, so obviously boost to their offense. With these moves, boost the defense, and I think most importantly, it's their offensive line, which I'm also predicting that they might use their ninth overall pick on more offensive line help. That's just me speculating, but that's where I think they might go. Talk to me about these moves. What do you make of these moves for the Chicago Bears?
Well, I love the Tremaine Edmonds signing. I really
Yeah.
did. Taking him from the Buffalo Bills, you take a piece off of that defense. That's a big thing. A guy I've said this earlier this week. He's not even 25 years old yet. He will not even hit the age of 30 by the time this contract is done. I think Edmonds was a fantastic move to say the very least. Nate Davis is a good guard. Like I think he's one of those guys that was, he was fine where he was in Tennessee. Doing a good job to be able to help block for Derrick Henry. He started double digit games. Like he's just a consistent offensive lineman in his career. And in Chicago, you needed that. Like the Bears' offensive line was bottom three, bottom four of the league. They were not good last season. So any acquisition there helps in any way, shape, or form. And the last of it is a guy in TJ Edwards, like you said, he's a good player. Like that Eagles defense was just so stacked. Like it's hard to say, like, dang, how much of an impact will he make? He's a good player. He played his role. He's not like made massive special plays that you could think of, but he's just a good player that fills up a position in the defense. And he's a hometown boy actually, from Chicago. So at the end of the day, like those were needed moves. Like the Bears, aside from Edmonds, like those aren't splashy moves, but those are roster building moves, which if you're the Chicago Bears, you need to make. Like you said, I mean, the idea that Dane brought up that I think people aren't even considering is that if Justin Fields fails this season, they could just get their next quarterback next season, and then you get to reset the rookie pay scale for yourself. Well, you just brought in a couple guys, at least a interior offensive lineman to be consistent, a defensive guy in Edmonds who you hope to be one of the pillars on the defensive side of things here, and a guy on Edwards who's just going to help fill out that linebacking core, maybe pass rush in a couple plays here and there on some downs. These were good moves. They're not special moves. These aren't the biggest names, but that's not what you're going for here. If you're a team like the Bears, you need to start off with moves like this to fill out the roster. The big names can come next season or the year after when you have the cap space, when you have maybe performed like a better team. That's when the bigger moves come. They're filling out their roster. These are really good moves.
Yeah, I really like these moves to the Bears too. Obviously adding Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards in the middle of the defense, it was huge, especially after you traded Roquan Smith. They got a lot of like backlash for that, but they got two guys that maybe aren't as good as Roquan Smith, but putting them together might give you more value than just having the one Roquan Smith, because I think they combined for like 96 million and Roquan Smith got like 100 or something like that. But so just adding those two, I think, was huge, especially after that loss. Adding Nate Davis, although he isn't the greatest, he's obviously not a Zach Martin or one of the best linemen in the league, but he's a solid starter that's going to start all 16 games for you, unless barring injury, he's not going to get benched for performance. And he's just going to give you stability. It's something that offensive line needs and any young rebuilding team needs. You might not get the most elite offensive lineman from the get, but while you're rebuilding, you need stability there. And I think Nate Davis does bring that. Something I didn't like, though, is they didn't go out and get a tackle for the offensive line. There's two out there that they were heavily rumored to maybe get, in Orlando Brown and Mike McGlinchey. McGlinchey, I think, went to the Broncos, and Orlando Brown last night went to the Bengals. I think either one of those two would have been a huge addition to that offensive line, because clearly tackles are probably more, in my opinion, more important than guards. So I think I would have really liked them to sign one of them, but I mean, maybe they'll draft them at 9, or I don't know, trade for one, something. Maybe trade for Mekhi Becton, please God. But that's the only thing I'd say I didn't like about their offseason so far. But it's still a lot of offseason to go, from trades to signings. So we'll see where they go. But for now, I'm okay with it. I'm not crazy about it, but I like what they're doing.
Okay. Let's move on to another team that also made a plethora of moves so far in this free agency. The Atlanta Falcons. So they signed. Let's go through this in order. They signed quarterback Taylor Heineke for 2 years, $20 million. I believe the Falcons are still without a legitimate starting quarterback. I know they have Desmond Ritter, but I do think Taylor Heineke was brought there for competition. That's just my prediction. Jesse Bates, safety. They snag him from the Cincinnati Bengals, 4 years, $64 million. They also signed David Onyemata, 3 years, $35 million. Caden Ellis, 3 years, 21.5 million, and then they beef up their O line. Chris Lindstrom, 5 years, 105 million, and then Caleb McGarry, 3 years, 34.5 million, and also they also traded for Jonu Smith, I believe, from the Patriots, right? Yeah. Falcons clearly busy this free agency period. My God, I do believe they had a bunch of needs and they had to improve certain areas in their roster. Defense was one of them, and I think they did do that. And that Chris Lindstrom signing, huge for them. So it's one of those things where, I mean, we've talked about this in the podcast. I think maybe Jerg talked about it with me, but they don't have a legitimate starting quarterback yet. But it is important to build up that offensive line, and the fact that they're doing that before they kind of go into the market for that um, starting quarterback, I think it is important to build that offensive line. So, look, again, we talked about it. Teams in like the NFC South and the NFC North, they're kind of wide open now. That those divisions are wide open now. So a lot of these teams are making like these kind of win now moves. You could make the argument that the Falcons are kind of setting themselves up for their future quarterback, which is also a plus. But I also do think they have some decent offensive options in the roster as well. It's for them to kind of be a competitive team at least. And I think these moves that they made in free agency, I like them a lot actually, because I do think they needed help defensively, and for the future quarterback, they're building their offensive line. So not the worst. Obviously, it's important to get that quarterback now, but options are kind of limited, and I do think Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ritter, like, they're stop gap quarterbacks right now, right? And I don't know, man. I feel like they could afford to make those kind of moves to kind of have a stopgap quarterback at the moment because of those divisions being so open. So I like these moves for the Falcons. Jerg, talk to me. What'd you make of the Falcons' moves this offseason so far?
I really liked it to the point of the offensive line. Lindstrom and McGarry, those were two guys they drafted back in 2019 and developed. And Lindstrom, especially, became one of the better guards in the NFL last season. So to lock in both of those guys was great. That's an instance where, like, I think they even traded back up to get McGarry. So, like, great drafting there. Like that's what good scouting can do if you have good scouting, and then to extend those guys now was really smart. Like you said, Onyemata as well, taking him away from the Saints because that was a piece on their defensive line. You take something away from a division rival, just nice moves. And Jonnu Smith, like he couldn't find his way in New England. He's not going to be the number one guy because we already know that the Falcons have their number one tight end. But to be that number two tight end, to just be dependable, he could even try to help with a pass block or just blocking in general, be that sixth offensive lineman on some plays. I don't think that's someone that Arthur Smith has necessarily had, or that's something that they didn't have last season, that the year before. Funny enough, Hayden Hurst actually played that role for the team when he was there as a predominantly, like, mainly blocker, but sometimes receiving tight end. So to get a guy like that back in the fold, I think is what helps the offensive scheming there. In terms of Heineke, this is the perfect situation for the Falcons. Could go one of two ways next season. They could actually be a decently competitive team and they could shock people. And if they have a chance, maybe they'll try to make a push when it comes to winning the division. Because again, that division is wide open. There's no definitive number one team. Or they just completely bottom out and Heineke and Desmond Ritter are just not that good. And next season is the Caleb Williams draft. Like, there's other guys as well, but like, he's the guy next season. This is an opportunity for you if you are Atlanta to see what you have on this roster, see what pieces work, see who is performing as is, and once you get the quarterback there, the guy there, how will it, who fits the mold from there? Do you need to get another receiving weapon, which they probably do? Aside from Drake London and Pitts, what on the defense is working, what's not working, all these questions that need to be asked, and you'll get that next season if you're Atlanta. Well, no matter how good or bad they are, these are nice signings, and they've put their team in a position where they can evaluate the roster and what they need from there. And if you're not going to be a definitive contending team, you need to evaluate what you need. The Falcons are able to do that. That's a win.
Yeah, the Falcons is another team that kind of suck and they're rebuilding, but I really like the Jesse Bates pickup. Obviously, big money. I'm pretty sure what was it, like the highest paid safety or like the fourth high, something like that. But it was one of the highest paid safeties ever. I mean, he deserves it. He's arguably the best safety in the league. Has been playing like that. So he knew that he was leaving a Bengals team that was obviously contending for a championship to go to a Falcons team that's rebuilding. But he got his money. But the Falcons are a team that obviously has promise. You have a lot of players, and I really like the best part of their offseason to me was retaining those two offensive linemen because I really value offensive line, and I think it's extremely important to have a solid offensive line, whether you're rebuilding, trying to contend, or just in the middle. I think the offensive line is one of the most important things. And they're at the eighth pick, I believe, or seventh pick, whatever case may be. I think they're going to miss out on a quarterback unless they trade up because it looks like 1-2 is going to go quarterback, and I don't think a quarterback's going to go past 4 either. So I think they might be gearing up for the next draft to get a quarterback. And with the moves they're doing now, I love it. Obviously, re-signing the lineman for the next few years, you're going to have a pretty solid offensive line for whatever quarterback you bring in, a solid foundation. For him, you obviously Kyle Pitts, you brought Gianno Smith. Gianno Smith, when he was on the Titans, there's a reason he got all that money from the Patriots because he was a really solid tight end. And I'll bring him alongside Kyle Pitts. Hopefully, they use Kyle Pitts a lot more, which will open up a lot more for Joanna Smith. But then on the outside, you have Drake London, who's establishing himself as a true number one receiver in this league, which is extremely important too. So whether they get a quarterback this year or not, the foundation is there for the Falcons, and they just keep growing on it with this offseason, clearly retaining their key core pieces to the team and adding superstars and big money superstars on the defensive side of the ball, which is it's obviously, I'd say, the weak points of the defense. So retaining the offensive side and kind of building on it and using most of your money on the defensive side of the ball, I think is the perfect way to go about it. And we'll see what they do with the quarterback position. But whether they get one this year or next year, I think he's set up for success.
All right. Let's move on. Speaking of another team that made very major moves this free agency period, the Denver Broncos. They make some major moves as well. Before we get to the major moves, Jared Stidham, quarterback. They get him for 2 years. They get their backup to
Franchise quarterback. What
Russell
are you talking
Wilson.
about?
You're right. Samaje Perine, running back. I believe he's gonna fill in for Javonte Williams. I don't know when Javonte Williams comes back, but I know he's hurt. He might be out for the entire season actually. So yeah, they get basically a stopgap running back until he comes back. And then of course we get onto the major moves. Uh, they improve their defense. Zach Allen, 3 years, 45 million, an already pretty stout defense, I must say. I believe that defense carried the Denver Broncos last season because God knows that offense was oof. And then of course, offensive line galore here. Ben Powers, 4 years, 52 million, and then Mike McGlinchey, 5 years, 87.5 million. Uh, Clearly investments in the protection of Russell Wilson. They are not playing any games. Yeah, I mean, look, offensive line is clearly prioritized as it should be this offseason so far, and the Broncos went ahead and made major moves, man. So yeah, they're going. They have no choice but to go all in. Actually, I mean, with that Russell Wilson move, you kind of have to at this point. There's no going back, so might as well invest in that protection for him. So Dame, let me stick with you. What'd you make of these moves for the Broncos?
Clearly they didn't solve their biggest problem at the quarterback position, but when you have the worst contract in sports,
Sports.
it's kind of hard to get out of it. Yeah, after Julius Randle's on the Knicks, but um, Mike McGlinchey, like I just mentioned him to the Bears, his connections to the Bears. I love this signing for the Broncos. For the Niners, he was one of the best tackles in the league, playing right tackle. I don't know if they're gonna play at left or right on the Broncos, probably right. But then adding Ben Powers at the guard position as well, using your two biggest signings in the offseason offensive line, I think is really important, especially when you bring a guy like Sean Payne, who's clearly offensive minded and kind of wants to get the most out of Russell Wilson and bring him back to maybe what he was in the Seahawks. So the way you do that is you do build that offensive line and make sure he is protected and not running for his life every play. because if he's running for his life every play and you don't give him time to throw, you can't really truly evaluate him and get the most out of him. It's kind of confusing why they're shopping Sutton and Jerry Judy to me, just to mention
That's
that.
crazy.
Um, Obviously, this team is in rebuilding. When you pay all that money and draft capital to get a guy like Sean Payton in, and all that money you're paying to Russell Wilson, you're clearly not a rebuilding team. So it's confusing to me why you want to get rid of two solid weapons on your team. It's not like you have guys after him that are capable of getting the job done. I get it, KJ Hamler's good and Tim Patrick are solid, but they're solid as number 3 and 4 guys. Having Sutton and Judy as your 1 and 2, I think, is perfect. Maybe you upgrade them, but I don't understand why you'd get rid of them without bringing in a better wide receiver. Other than that, they didn't really do much to their defense, I don't think. Um, Zach Allen, I guess he's all right. Kind of a lot of money, but Samaje Perine, I think, is a good actually backup because Javonte Williams is pretty positive he's not going to be ready for the start of the season. He's going to miss a few months. And Perine, when Joe Mixon was whether out for a couple drives or out for a game or two, he showed that he was fully capable of being a 3-down running back. So I really like that signing for them. 2 for 7.5 is basically a steal. But yeah, I do like what the Broncos are doing. It's just confusing to me why they're trying to trade Son and Judy.
Yeah, I don't really get it either. Maybe it's just a scheming thing with Sean Payton, or he just doesn't like those guys. Who knows? But yeah, they're assessing trade offers, at least for Judy definitively. Sutton, I've heard his name is floated out there, but I mean, we'll see with that organization. Yeah, no, the offensive line was a big thing with it, and especially Sean Payton. I mean, we just kind of got done talking about, we briefly mentioned the Saints earlier. And in Sean Payton's time there, like the offensive line, they had, at a very consistent basis, a top 10 offensive line in the NFL. And that's what those two things do. You get Powers, who it's taking away an offensive line piece from the Baltimore Ravens, who good. It's amazing that bad things are happening to that organization this offseason. We love to see it. And you get McGlinchey from the 49ers, who, like Dame said, like that's a guy they drafted, they developed, and he's become one of the better tackles on the right side in the game. And now you just added to an offensive line that the big thing will be protecting Russ, because it was clearly obvious last season that Russell Wilson didn't have the same, mobility in the pocket. So if Russ's mobility is a question, he needs to become a little bit more of a pocket passer with at least the option to just move around in the pocket. Maybe can't make the outside, running plays that he did when he was in Seattle. But if he needs to be closer to just, pass first definitively, these are two guys that'll help beef up that O-line, which is what they need to do when you're stuck with, that joke of a quarterback room, which again, Jarrett Stidham, franchise quarterback, can't wait to see him succeed next season. But yeah, there's still questions on this team. Like Zach Allen, I just kind of scratched my head at it. This is a guy who I think his career high was last season. What was it? 5.5 sacks he had? Like, okay, that's a bit of a gamble. We'll see how he performs here. There are pieces on that defense that I like. There's still a lot. Evero, their defensive coordinator from the last couple seasons, who helped that team who helped that defense just play really good and become successful. He's no longer there. He left to the Carolina Panthers coaching staff actually earlier in the offseason. So we'll see what happens there with a different DC, with Sean Payton's guy that he has now. It's a wait and see situation. Like I like what Denver did on paper, but I think there's still just the bad taste of last season, and Russell Wilson needs to prove a lot. This is a team that has more to do, and like the signings, the offensive line is the position I'm most confident in, like the position group I'm most confident on this team. But with the rumors like we've mentioned of they could be trading one, if not their top 2 receivers, I don't really get it, but it's Denver. Like, what is this Broncos team going to be? I think of all the teams we've talked about so far, that Dame said it before, there's still plenty of offseason to go. This is the team that we have to say that about, because we have no idea what they're going to do. With the Panthers and the Falcons, okay, they're going to keep trying to add pieces, right? With the Bears, they're going to add pieces. These are teams with high draft picks, et cetera, et cetera. This team lost their first round pick because they traded to Seattle. Yes, I know they got a first round pick in the Dolphins deal, but like this is a team that just what is the vision here? What is the vision? I think this is the team definitively I'm the most meh about, because for every good signing they made, there was a bad signing, or there's someone they lost. Like I think Draymond Jones to the Seattle Seahawks, like I think he'll be a decent player. I think he can actually have a potential really good season there. So you lose a piece on that defensive line that had, I want to say 6.5, 7 sacks last year, and you bring in a guy that had less last season. Why not just pay Jones and let Zach Allen, let someone else potentially overvalue him on the market. So I don't know. With Denver, this is the definition of a team. We got to let the rest of this offseason play out and see what happens, because right now I'm kind of on them.
All right. Okay. Now we move on to before we actually move on to our next segment. Do want to give a shout out to the Washington Commanders. Speaking of O line investments, they really did invest in their O line. Andrew Wiley, 3 years, $24 million. They re-signed Tyler Larson, and then they also signed Nick Gates, 3 years, $16.5 million. Man, teams really going all in for offensive line, and shout out to them, man. Offensive linemen, you really should get paid the big bucks, and they are. They are. They are prioritized. They're really important. So yeah, I mean, we don't have to talk much about. We don't have to talk a lot about on that, unless you guys have any comments about the Commanders, investing in their O line. If not, we can move on.
Not really.
Okay,
Not really.
let's move on over to some other key moves in the NFL. Again, more free agency signings and also some trades here. I decided to go like one per team. I don't want to focus on every team, so I'm just gonna go. I know a lot of these teams made more moves, but these are the key signings that I actually want to go through. So I'm gonna go through all of them. And fellas, if there's one that you guys want to particularly talk about, or a signing that you were a fan of that I didn't mention, please, by all means. But let me just mention everything so far. That I have on my list personally. Uh, Las Vegas Raiders signed Jimmy G, 3 years, $67.5 million. They get their quarterback after losing Derek Carr for nothing. Tampa Bay Bucks also get Tom Brady's successor in Baker Mayfield, 1 year, $8.5 million. The Steelers get cornerback Patrick Peterson, 2 years, $14 million. Kind of a steal. The Jets sign Alan Lazard, 4 years, $44 million. Yeah, we're not going to talk about the other move because that move has not been made yet. But yeah, they get another wide receiver, one that they kind of did need. New Orleans Saints get Jamal Williams, 3 years, $12 million. In my opinion, I think one of the biggest steals this free agency. $12 million. That's kind of wild, and it also should be mentioned that I believe who did the who, did the Lions sign another? I think they signed
David
David Montgomery.
Montgomery.
There we go, from the Bears. I don't know. Whatever. So yeah, 49ers also Javon Hargrave, 4 years, $80 million, which was a wow.
I
Rich get
like that
rich.
deal.
Yeah, I like it too, but rich get richer, especially the defensive juggernauts. Seahawks, Draymond Jones, 3 years, $51 million. Patriots signed Juju Smith Schuster, 3 years, um, $33 million. That one was wow, that came out of left field, which was kind of hilarious because I believe they let Jacoby Myers go. He went to the Raiders for the same amount of money, the same amount of years. Juju Smith-Schuster and Bill Belichick is comedy, waiting to happen. Texans signed Jimmy Ward, 2 years, $13 million, a solid pickup for them. Bengals, Orlando Brown, offensive line help, desperately needed. 4 years, $64 million. Bengals get much needed offensive line help, and he gets the money he's been looking for. Chiefs, Jawan Taylor, 4 years, $80 million. They were losing some key pieces on that offensive line. They make a key addition here. And then of course we go into some key trades. The Giants traded for Darren Waller, a offensive weapon for their new, I mean, not their new quarterback, but for their quarterback for the next 4 years, Daniel Jones. And then, of course, the Dolphins traded for Jalen Ramsey. It was like a backup tight end, but most importantly, a third round pick. Fellas, those are the key moves that I've highlighted. Obviously, a bunch of other stuff happened, but those are the ones I kind of wanted to highlight, and we can't go through all of them. But obviously, we're going to talk about the trade for Jalen Ramsey as well. If you guys want to start off with that, and then we could talk about the other free agency moves that I maybe mentioned or that I may have missed that you guys want to talk about. But before we get into the free agency moves, let's talk about the trade. Actually, the trades first. Giants get Darren Waller. Dolphins get Jalen Ramsey. You guys can talk about Darren Waller if you want. I do want to talk about Jalen Ramsey. I'm very surprised. I know the Rams kind of did him a solid because I believe he requested to go to the Dolphins. But if I'm the Rams, man, like, I don't know, you're kind of in this pseudo rebuilding phase, not fully because you still have Stafford, Cup, and Aaron Donald, but like a third rounder for Jalen Ramsey, I feel like you could have at least gotten a second, and there could have been a lot more suitors, I feel like, for him. But I don't know, man. It's kind of one of those situations. Like I know you want to do right by your players, but geez, I don't know, man. I feel like they could have gotten a little bit of a better package here, bro. A third round pick? Whatever. Maybe that's just me. Maybe there wasn't another package deal. You never know these type of things. But yeah, and Darren Waller, I like it. I love it for the Giants. You know, they're done rebuilding. They kind of have to go all in. You sign Jones to that mega contract. Yeah, you tax Saquon Barkley. They need some help from like the receiver tight end core, and they get that with Darren Waller. I don't necessarily know why the the Raiders traded for him. I think there was some disconnect between him and McDaniels. Not sure. You guys could speak upon that. So before we
Oh,
get to,
what a shock that there was
yeah,
a disconnect
yeah,
between Josh McDaniels and someone on that team.
yeah. So before you guys talk about the other free agency moves, just talk about those two trades. Damien, let me start off with you. What'd you make of these two trades, and for both teams that acquired them?
So obviously, the Jalen Ramsey one is the big one because arguably Jalen Ramsey is the best cornerback in the league, and a lot of people were shocked at the third round price. I kind of get it though with his contract and the fact that he wanted to rework. I think the Dolphins like guaranteed the last 2 years on the deal that weren't fully guaranteed or something like that, something along those lines. So obviously, the more money in the contract, the less draft compensation there is. But yeah, I'm sure the fact that they were trying to do right by Ramsey and send him somewhere he wanted to go, I think also maybe affected the price because I'm sure there probably was a team more desperate that maybe would have given it to, but I guess the Rams just love their players more than love their franchise and decided to get a third round pick instead. But for the Dolphins, I mean, they have or probably not arguably, I'd say the best cornerback duo in the league. They overtook my Jets as the best cornerback duo in the league with Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey now. It's going to be really hard to throw on that defense. Defense that already has a pretty good defensive line, so they're going to bring a lot of pressure, and the cornerbacks are going to do a great job of covering. So that team's going to be a force to be reckoned with. For the Rams, I guess it's just, I mean, they've been playing around and fiddling with the cap for so long now that I guess it's eventually catching up to them. So they get a lot of money off the books now with Jalen Ramsey, so that's good for them. But it seems like they're entering that kind of limbo stage where they're like not bad enough to kind of fully rebuild, but not good enough to really compete for a championship. So it's gonna be interesting to see the direction they take the next like 2 years. As for the Darren Waller trade, um, obviously I think Darren Waller is one of the best tight ends in the league. And I do like it for the Giants. I think the value there, you have to take that anytime, any day. Like getting a talent like that, the tight end position, which is a premium position in this league. But Darren Waller has not been healthy throughout his entire career. Whether it was off the field issues or on the field injuries, like I don't think he's played a full season ever. I know last year he basically missed an entire season, and the year before that he had injury issues. So it's going to be very important to keep him healthy and keep him on the field because if he does stay on the field, I think he's their best offensive weapon outside of Saquon Barkley, obviously, but their best pass catching weapon because the Giants arguably have the worst pass catching, one of the worst pass catching units in the entire league. Isaiah Hodgins and Sterling Shepard are just not it. But putting a guy like Darren Wall there is going to make Daniel Jones' life a lot easier now because he has a big target in the middle of the field that can get open and has a wide catch radius. So I do like it for the Giants. As for the Raiders, I mean, whoever knows what the Raiders are doing, I mean, poor Devontae Adams. The man's a trade there to play with his buddy. Thinks he's going to play alongside like Josh Jacobs and Darren Waller and have Derek Carr as his quarterback, and now he's just alone. Guess he still has Josh Jacobs, but they franchise tagged him. It's not like they re-signed him for multiple years. So it's going to be interesting to see even Devontae Adams' future there, but I'm confused as to what the Raiders are doing and what direction they're going. So I'm sure if they're going in a full rebuild, it makes sense. But if you're going in a full rebuild, you might as well trade Devontae Adams too.
Have we not made the joke before on this podcast, Dame, with the Raiders as one of the teams is like we have no idea what they're doing? Like
No idea.
like who know? Like first off, I'm not surprised. I know Chris briefly glossed over it. Jimmy G to the Raiders now as their quarterback. Oh, what a shock! Josh McDaniels gets a guy that he's worked with before and gets someone that he clearly wanted over Derek Carr. That's not a surprise. And with the Darren Waller thing, I'm just going to mention briefly. He has had some injury issues the last couple of years, so that's part of the reason why they only got a third round pick back for him. I think he could be good with the Giants. The Giants definitely need it. They need more offensive weapons if they're going to help Daniel Jones there. I gave my thoughts on that last week when it came to that contract extension and that situation as a whole. adding an offensive weapon just helps them, and that's all they need. For the Raiders, good luck. That's all I can say. I have not seen anyone make the Devontae Adams like a Will Smith meme, where like they just put like Will Smith in that room when he's all alone with that like carpet, and it's like Devontae Adams with the Raiders now because Josh Jacobs he might be franchise tag. I don't think he wants to stay there anymore. So there's that. By the way, props Josh McDaniels and the Raiders as a whole. They traded Waller. Was it the day of his wedding or like a day or two after? It was something along those
I think
lines.
after,
Yeah, like
because he wasn't. I think McDaniel's wasn't invited.
yeah, yeah. So confirmed, Josh McDaniels does not love love. So there it is. That's really my only thoughts on that. The Jalen Ramsey one is way more of a big deal. As someone who in a different sport, his team was hamstrung to trade a guy to only one team he wanted to go to. I sympathize with Los Angeles Rams fans that they didn't really get that much back for Jalen Ramsey, and they still wanted to do right by him. Um, this is where you sometimes like they weren't going to be cold blooded and do it because like the bad part. One of the things I don't like now about today's age is that a GM that makes a decision best for the team and that it could still be good for the player, but is not player first, is that they are perceived as having a bad reputation with players. And I think that's what the Rams wanted to avoid here. But I think that's stupid because I think anyone would agree they've been pretty good with their players, I want to say. But they just did right by Jalen Ramsey, sending him to Miami, tax-free state for his contract. Like Dave said, I'm pretty sure the Dolphins reworked his deal. They also reworked the Xavier Howard deal about a year ago, and they cut Byron Jones. Even I'm pretty sure it's been made official, but if not, like he's designated, I think, a post June 1st cut, so they could save the most amount of cap possible. Very much like a certain Cowboys running back was released a similar way. Um, I think it was a
fullback, not running back, fullback.
no, yeah, fair. Well, all offensive lineman actually, considering what the last play of his career was.
He was a center. Yep,
Yep,
right,
center.
right.
But I think Jalen Ramsey to the Dolphins. This is the thing when you have Tua still in his rookie deal. I think this is the last year of his rookie deal, and next year with the 5th year option, which is a pay increase, but it's not like to the same level of what a team would pay like Daniel Jones or something like that. At the end of it, the Dolphins believe they have a window. The Bills lost Tremaine Edmonds. Like there's some questions about how they got bounced in the playoffs last year surrounding this team. So they just decided, hey, like let's just keep going at this. And I love it when a team just decides to keep going at it. So I think it was a pretty good one by the Dolphins. You have a great 1-2 punch at corner right now. I know Jalen Ramsey had a down season last year for himself, but he's still a really good cornerback. He's only 28 years old, and now it's him and Xavier Howard. Those are two guys you don't want to throw to. Now they're just going to be covering both sides of the field. Like the Dolphins have a chance to be a pretty good defense next season. And that's the thing. Last year they underperformed defensively, and they fired their defensive coordinator at the end of the year. That's why they brought in good old Vic Fangio. So this is a guy that they're hopeful to work with, because if there's one thing you can say about Vic Fangio, if you give him a good defensive back crew, potentially do some damage. So I did like that from the Dolphins' perspective when it came to the Ramsey deal. For the Rams, you kind of said it, Chris. Like this team, it's had its success. It said F them picks, and now it went from F them picks to F, man, we need some picks now. So that's what it is in LA land. They won their championship. They obviously do want to still contend. I think this team is trying to compete next season, because I think if they were fully rebuilding, I think Sean McVay would have left. I don't think Sean McVay is here for a rebuilding team. Dude could have left and got like $15-16 million to just do commentary. Like, so I think they're going to try to be competitive. How? Who knows? But we'll see. Like, as long as Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp are there, I think there's a promise in the organization that they're going to try. They just had to completely fix up the cap situation, because like they were in a bad spot, to say the very least.
Yeah. Yeah, so of those free agency moves that I mentioned beforehand, if you guys remember them, are which ones stand out to you? You guys could talk about one move that you guys thought was pretty eventful, or multiple that you guys think uh are worth talking about.
Uh-huh.
Jerg, let me start off with you since we kind of finished with you. Would you any moves that you thought were worth a discussion?
Well, I thought it was interesting that the Chiefs signed Jawan Taylor from the Jags for,
Hmm.
what was it, 4 years, $80
Yeah.
million.
Yeah.
But Orlando Brown only signed for 4 years, 64. Now, could it have just been Orlando Brown may have been asking them for a bit more because he was there? Maybe. Um, I just didn't really understand it. You're paying $16 million more a year to a guy that Jawan Taylor has done a good job for himself. He's improved since his time in Jacksonville. But Orlando Brown Jr. is the 4-time Pro Bowler who's now going to Cincinnati, and him and Jonah Williams are going to be a pretty good tackle duo. to say the very least. I just thought that was interesting. I'm not saying it merits a deep dive discussion, but I just thought it was peculiar to say the very least.
Right.
Like I said, I like the Hargrave signing in part because you take him away from the Eagles. You take away a guy who had double digit sacks for that team last season, a piece on a team that you're going to be competing with for the crown of the NFC. I think no matter what, it's still Eagles, 49ers as the top two teams in the NFC until further notice this offseason. So I thought that was a pretty good signing for themselves. The Giants made a couple like minor moves. They got Bobby Okereke from the Colts. I think that's just like a decent linebacker that they added to their core. Like teams are making good moves here, I should say. That they're trying to load up, they're trying to compete here. I do like a good amount of them. How much of that merits a lot of big discussion? I don't know. I'm more interested to see like what a team like the Eagles offseason to me is the more interesting thing because they've lost a
Mhm.
couple guys now on that defense, especially. They double backed and they decided to keep Darius Slay, and they're gonna work that out. But now does that mean they lose Chauncey Gardner Johnson in free agency? Because he has said he wants to give the Eagles a chance to match up to whatever deals he's getting. But I've heard the Broncos are trying to make a late push for CJGJ. I've heard the Bengals have been in that for quite some time, which is why they let Jesse Bates go because I think that organization is hell bent on getting him in that secondary. Like the Eagles are going to be losing pieces of that team, of that defense that made a run at the Super Bowl. And I think that's just the more interesting thing to look at of wherever Chauncey Gardner Johnson goes, like I could be wrong. Dame, am I missing someone? Is Chauncey Gardner Johnson the last big piece on the defensive side of things that could actually like make a difference if he goes to a team like Cincy, or is there someone else I'm missing here that hasn't signed yet?
No, I think he is the big defensive guy that's left on the market. I mean, you have guys like Bobby Wagner, but like he's washed. So I'd say Gardner Johnson is probably the biggest piece out there right now.
Mm,
I know the Eagles are
mhm.
fighting hard to try to re-sign him. I know they said they released Darius Slay yesterday, but now last night came back that they're trying to rework a deal with him. So we'll see how that works out. I mean, they lost a lot of pieces, man, like on both sides of the ball too. So it's gonna be interesting to see how they kind of recoup. I mean, when you have two first round picks and one of them is like the 10th pick, you probably could move that back and get multiple picks and kind of fill these positions with cheaper contracts. So interesting to see how their offseason unfolds.
Yeah, I think that's more the interest for me personally. Like, good guys have been signed. Don't get me wrong. If Dame wants to mention a contract or two in particular, he can here. But I think the more interesting thing is just to see what the teams at the top of the league have done to try to improve or what they've lost. I think seeing how the Eagles offseason will finish out, like Dame said, their two first round picks will be interesting. I think the 49ers, what they're going to try to do to fix this, because now you lose McGlinchey. That was an offensive line last season. My only doubt about that team was because they lost Alex Mack due to retirement. Now you lose your starting right tackle. How are they going to bounce back from that? Are they going to be able to draft a replacement in a late round, or are they maybe going to trade for like some random guy, or is there someone on their roster that we just don't know about yet? On the AFC side of things, the Bengals, like I said, they're going for CJGJ. What are the Buffalo Bills going to do? I don't think they've really done anything this offseason. So I've seen them restructure contracts, but that's about it. And
I think they re-signed Poyer
oh yeah, they did that.
and I believe Connor McGovern.
Cool.
They signed Connor McGovern.
Cool. Anyways,
Yeah.
and the Kansas City Chiefs, like they lost TikTok boy. He's going to since New England. Excuse me. Um, what are they going to do to just help out Mahomes and Kelsey continue their run of dominance in the AFC? So, like, I'm more interested to see what the top teams do, and then what did the second tier teams do? Like the Minnesota Vikings are losers in free agency right now because they cut Adam Thielen, which I understood because he was getting old, but they lost Patrick Peterson, who I give credit to. I thought Pat Pete was washed. He played really well last season. Now he's going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I think was a great underrated signing. The Minnesota
hmm
Vikings are doing nothing to definitively try to keep that division in their hands, which the Detroit Lions, like what they could do this
hmm
offseason. I'm more interested to see what teams are going to do for the rest of this offseason. Like I said, it's only the first, like, we're not even a full week into free agency, even though it feels like we're almost done. We're not a full week into the transactions. And now begins, I think, the slow burn to the NFL draft next month on what
Yeah.
teams are going to do.
I think Jurg, I think some of like I think the Eagles, for example, just an example, like some of these teams I think need to wait till the draft for them to kind of start their off season. Like I think I don't want to judge the Eagles yet. Obviously they've taken some major hits, but I think it'll take until a Jalen Hurts contract negotiation and then the draft because they do own the Saints picks
Yeah.
for them to kind of start their off season or like kind of officially like not start because they have made some moves here, but like to kind of I guess, put into perspective their entire offseason, you
Grade
know?
it. That's what it is.
Yeah.
We're only grading free agency right now.
Yeah, right now.
I mean,
So,
I will say again, I think CJ like that'll be a big tell if they replace him and how they're going to replace him if he does end up leaving the team. I think that is a fair assessment to make. But no, yeah, I get. I know some of these teams like their offseason is really more so going to happen at the draft, but like it's just something to try to plot out. And maybe it is just the second tier teams that we need to figure out. But I mean, hey man, that's the beauty of the NFL. I think aside from that, I don't know. I think like of all the moves you said, Chris, like they're all good moves. I like a good chunk of them, but there's nothing crazy. Like
yeah.
I think we've talked about and gave enough focus to the bigger moves already as is, unless Dame wants to add anything to it.
I mean,
No,
like
I
there's
don't really have anything.
um yeah, I mean again, like it's hard to like kind of because the draft is going to
It's still
be
very early in the offseason.
yeah, it is early. And I think the draft is going to be major for some of these teams. And there's going to be a lot of movement during the draft, too. So, I mean, there's still also a plethora of trades that need to happen from Austin Eckler wants a trade. Allen Robinson wants a trade. Like a bunch of
DeAndre
these.
Hopkins, Aaron Rodgers,
Hopkins might get traded.
obviously.
I
The
mean, yeah, the
only
Rodgers thing hasn't
are you moving Derrick Henry if you're the Titans? There's a
exactly.
lot.
Like, it's weird. Like, we even talk about the Allen Lazard signing for the Jets without Aaron Rodgers? Because he hasn't officially been traded. So who knows?
Well, also,
Last thing
what's going to happen with Baltimore right now? Like they,
oh, I mean, oh god, yeah. I don't know, but I do want to ask you guys, um, what did you guys make of the Jamal Williams to the Saints move? 3 years, 12 million. Because I thought that was wild. Because my God, was that a steal? In
yeah,
my opinion,
I don't understand why Detroit let him go. I think because what did Montgomery sign for? 3 years.
18 million, I think.
What's the point there? Like
I don't know, and I think Jamal Williams is kind of better to me.
but also like David Montgomery to me is closer. I mean, I think DeAndre Swift is a better overall, but I think their skill sets are a bit more comparable. I think Jamal Williams was the perfect, thunder to Swift's lightning. And I don't understand why they let him go in Detroit. And I think he's just a good vibes guy all around. It's sad that he has to go to the Saints because that organization doesn't deserve a good vibes player like him. Uh, but aside from that, I think he'll be good. I just think the thing with the Saints is that like they just restructured Michael Thomas's deal, but you have no idea what's going to happen with him because God, he's been so injury riddled ever since he won Offensive Player of the Year. You have Alvin Kamara, who wanted to be an idiot off the field last season, and there's still like court hearings to be happen for for everything he got involved in. Like this is a combo of an insurance policy for Derek Carr, and also, hey, if we do have Kamara back in the fold, Jamal Williams will be the perfect foil to him now. I think that was an A+ deal by the Saints. I just don't understand why Detroit let him go. I really don't get it.
Yeah, I don't really look too much into it. I don't think he's that good, but I do agree with the whole locker room kind of good vibes guy. He's a good leader to have in the locker room, and I think he was huge for a team like the Lions. Clearly, they're more in the rebuilding phase than the Saints are, even though I think they're right there to contend for the playoffs next year. I think bringing back Jamal Williams would have been huge. I think the message and the leadership you saw a Hard Knocks and like the clips of that. Like him and Dan Campbell really get along well and are great faces to kind of lead that team and lead the young guys. So taking him off that and taking him out of that locker room is going to be interesting to see how that affects everybody on that team. Um, he Jamal Williams is gonna let me say this. He's gonna infuriate a lot of fantasy players. He did that this year with Swift, where he just took all his goal line touchdowns, and now you're gonna see it again with Alvin Kamara. So I just want to throw that out there. Just fantasy managers, be aware that Jamal Williams is gonna be like one of the number one enemies in fantasy football. But for the Saints, I mean, he's kind of going to play that Mark Ingram role, I guess. Very similar players too, like power bags, veterans. Been there, done that. Not super explosive, but they'll get the job done in limited action. So I think it's a really good signing for the Saints. But yeah, you need a backup behind Kamara because he's clearly had his injury history and he still has that legal case over him. The video came out and stuff, so we'll see where that goes. So having a guy to back him up and be capable of doing it, you've seen him be capable of doing it for multiple years, I think is a really good signing for the Saints.
Well, yeah. I guess you call this phase one of free agency. There's still a bunch of moves to be made. Trades need to occur. Who knows? I mean, we're still Yeah, man. Like Bobby Wagner's still out there. OBJ's still out there. Just wow. Aaron Rodgers is still out
Well, we
there.
know where OBJ is going apparently.
What is the Cowboys? Yeah.
Oh man,
Oh god, I don't know. But look, so far, I mean, we have so much stuff to talk about, and we're gonna have a bunch of stuff to talk about going forward. So I love it. I know y'all love it. I know the fans love it. Just movement in the NFL, and there's no better, time for sports. Besides like NBA free agency or NBA deadline as well, trade deadline. But NFL, man, shout out to them. They've been on the come up in terms of news. Yeah, I think that'll do it for this week. Anything else? Are we done?
I think so. I mean,
All
if
right.
we're not going to talk about he who must not be named on this podcast apparently until it's official. So
Yeah,
we'll wait for
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I don't need him calling us out either.
Dame, I don't want to hear from you, man. You need to leave Mekhi Becton alone. How about that? How about that, you bully?
You know, I was talking about Aaron Rodgers.
No, I know
Fuck
you
that
were.
guy.
I know you were, but I still want you to leave Mekhi Becton alone. Before he
No,
slaps
I'm
you up,
coming
boy.
after him every day.
You know that's fun.
He absolutely will slap me up.
Wait.
motivation.
Can we like? I'm kind of out of the loop. Should we bring it up here on the pod for shits and giggles?
Dame
Or
is
like,
a
what happened?
scumbag, and Mekhi
Go
Becton
ahead.
likes to daily post like his updates, his workouts, and he's just like, "Yo, another something motivation." And then Dame commented on Twitter saying you suck or something that he's fat, and then you should
Jesus.
get traded. And
No.
then you responded.
No. I never commented on his workout pictures. I just sent in group chats as motivation for all my boys.
Okay, but
What I commented on is he had a stupid tweet about how he can't wait to wear like senior on his jersey. I'm like, bro, you're never gonna wear it because you don't play.
and then he responded.
Then he responded. He didn't even come at me. He just responded like, call me a loser or something like that. But then
He's
like
coming at you though.
fans attacked me.
Yes.
Fans are what came at me crazy.
Attaboy, Jets
Like
fans.
I had to literally like mute the tweet because I kept getting notification after notification.
Dame, you can't be bullying people like that, man.
I feel.
Bro,
Oh my god. That's.
He's infuriating, bro. Like he acts like the world's against him when he's the fat fuck that can't stay on the field.
Well, look, man. I mean,
It's not my fault he's not healthy and fat.
I mean, look.
Like I can't help
he
you.
looks like he's lost some weight. He looks like he's gone back into shape. Like, all
Well,
right.
guess what? Then when he stays healthy and stays on the field, I'll be wrong. Until then, I'm right.
Oh yeah. So until then, you're not gonna comment on any of his tweets.
No, I will be commenting. I commented, I think, yesterday
What'd you say?
or today.
Oh my god.
Give me a second.
I want to hear this. This will be the last point.
Oh my god. So Mekhi Becton and Zion Williamson can apparently catch all the smoke on this podcast. We do not care.
Oh, I got blocked.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh my god. I got blocked.
Good
It was
shit, Mekhi.
today.
Good
Breaking
shit.
news.
We gotta
All
get
right,
Mekhi Becton
tweet.
on this podcast, man.
All right, Chris, you and me are gonna have to handle that, I guess.
Yo, oh my god, he did has blocked me.
Good.
But he tweeted something cryptic like you can't trust anyone or something, or like you have to go on his Twitter and see it. Something like being left out the loop or something like that. And I was like, have fun on Green Bay's IR. And I just looked at it and it says tweet unavailable, and I go to his Twitter and I got blocked.
Yeah. He should have been nice to you, Dame. He should have been nice and just, yeah. Wow. Have fun on Green Bay's IR. I mean, who knows? But look, the Jets need O-line help, man. We need to pray that he gets healthy. Just something, bro. Something. All right, Jerk, we're gonna find us on the socials.
You can find us at somewhat.sports on Instagram when we are not taking shots at athletes on their posts on social media. But in all seriousness, you can follow us there at somewhat.sports. You get updates whenever we post episodes out, which are on YouTube and Spotify, ladies and gentlemen. It's somewhat space and then sports on those two lovely platforms. Please like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're building that up. And please, follow us on Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating. Let us know what you want to hear. Do you want us to just randomly start beefing with athletes on social media like Dame has? Will that bring more intrigue in the show? What else do you want us to talk about? We got the NFL draft slowly coming up. This is the third NFL draft we're going to do. I'm very excited about. We're going to bring special guests in for that as well. We're going to talk about MLB here relatively soon. And we're going to try to do a little bit more stuff with the NFL coming up here before the draft. I'm excited for what this stretch of time has. And after the NFL draft, baby, it's the NBA and the NHL playoffs. Most exciting time of the year, I think, is from April to June when it comes to just transactions, talking about stuff, etc. And this is the podcast to go to. I've said it at the start of the show, and I'll say it again. Best sports podcast out there, the Somewhat Sports Podcast.
Beautifully put as always, Jerg. Beautifully put as always. I appreciate y'all too for steering the ship with me as always. We're gonna have a bunch of NFL news going forward and a bunch of other stuff. MLB starting, NHL, NBA playoffs soon. whole 9 yards. We're going to talk about it. Yeah. Thank you to all the listeners. If you made it this far, we appreciate you. And until next time, peace.